Welcome back to my channel. I have been excited about getting to these pictures because St. Peter's Basilica was next to the Sistine Chapel, was probably the highlight of my time in Rome. I would rank it the Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's Basilica, St. Agnes of the Agony, and the Vatican Museums as the top four. Everything else is fifth. There is just something about walking into St. Peter's. I believe it is the largest basilica in the world. You can fit the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. inside of it. I think that I read somewhere that you could put the Statue of Liberty under the dome. It's that tall. So there's just a lot of stuff about St. Peter's. And I have to say that the day that I went, I was a little off my game of what I went for as far as photography goes after running into the Pope. Because the whole cathedral, the whole basilica was sort of, there was a lot of it that was off limits. And so it kind of impeded a couple of things that I had looked forward to doing while I was there. Small price to pay. It doesn't really matter. I'm not Catholic. I don't listen to the Pope every Sunday. That doesn't matter. There is something about that office, and maybe about this particular man in that office for me. I don't know, but I stayed. I sat off to the side in one of the narthexes. I sat off to the side while he gave his homily, which he sat down on a chair and spoke into a microphone. And I was struck, and I think I posted about it at the time on social media, I was struck by the fact that his voice never got loud. It was always a whisper, very soft. And the thing that hit me was, when you have true authority, I mean real authority, you don't have to be loud. That could take me down a whole long path about my time in the church and being a pastor myself and all of that. I won't go there today. But it did dawn on me from an educator standpoint that I know that I am overly loud in the classroom. I get my dad voice on when I'm teaching in the classroom. I want to be able to project to the back. And yet maybe that's not really what I need to do. But that's not why you're here. You're not here to talk about the classroom routine. You're here to talk about some photography things. So a couple of things I want to talk about today. One is just a few pictures of the basilica. I won't take you through a lot of them. And then I'll look at some HDR that we did while we were there. And then a look at La Pieta. Because La Pieta ranks above the basilica for me. I could stand and look at this sculpture forever. So let's begin. There's a lot of pictures on my Flickr page, and you're free to go there. There's a link on the blog page. There's a link to my blog page in the description of this video. You can find a way to get there if you're interested. There's 56 or so images from inside, round day outside of St. Peter's Basilica. So you can take a look at what's there. But just a couple of pictures I'll throw up here. You could look at pictures of the ceiling forever. You could look at pictures of columns forever and statues forever. But I did take a couple of pictures for the sole purpose of just emphasizing the size of the place. And you can see that in the pictures that are scrolling across the screen now. This place is just absolutely massive. I mean, it is massive. And it has been designed and redesigned again throughout the years. And what we have before us is sort of a remix on a design, if you will, by Michelangelo. The dome was Michelangelo's design. and the wings out to the side, his design. And after his death, as they were still working, another architect came in and sort of made a few adjustments here and there as well. So what we're seeing basically is a design by Michelangelo, which is interesting to me, and we'll come back to this in a minute on the La Pieta, but it's interesting to me because one of the very first works that Michelangelo ever did as a sculptor is La Pieta, and it is inside the basilica that he designed. So we'll come back to that. The other thing I want to talk about, just briefly, for those of you that have EOS R cameras, I was not aware the EOS-R did this. Typically, when I go out to take HDR photos, and for those that may not know, it just means we're taking a bracketed shot. We have one shot that is set to the right amount of light, so it's lit perfectly. And then we go down 2 stops to a darker place, and then we go up 2 stops to a much brighter image. And the idea is you take those 3 bracketed images, you pull them into Lightroom or Photoshop, and you blend them together so that you can get more detail in the shadows and you can get more detail in the really high light. We are able to see a much broader range of light spectrum than our camera can record. And so we need to give it a little help every once in a while. So I decided that I would do some HDR shots, and on a fluke, as I was changing my settings on the back of my camera, I came up to the spot to set the bracketing exposures and could not remember that I had to push the down button on the circle in the back. And I was like, why is this not giving me brackets? I don't understand why this is not giving me brackets. So I started searching, thinking maybe this camera does this different. I thought I had taken bracketed shots with this camera before. But I stumbled on a setting, and I will try to put something in the description about it, but I stumbled on a setting that automatically does the HDR blending in the camera. And I was not aware that the EOS R did that. And there are probably a lot of other cameras that do, and other Canon cameras that do. I've just never had one that did that. So that's what I chose. And so I took these pictures, and I'll give you an example. Here are some pictures that I took. Here is the darker image of the picture. Here is the brighter image of the picture, and here is the mid image of the picture. Now, typically, those 3 images then would be brought into Lightroom, and Lightroom would do all of this magic math. But instead, in the camera, it auto-aligns all the images because, you know, you're hand holding, you can't hold the camera still through 3 shots. It auto-aligns everything and then blends it all into a JPEG file as to whatever you have your JPEG set to inside the camera. And I think I have mine set to a neutral. And it pulled up a JPEG that looked like this. And that is almost good enough to just say it's done. But I added a little highlight, or took away a little highlight, added a little shadow, did a few other little tips and tricks here and there, and came up with this final image. But I would never have gotten this image, I don't think, in some of these situations, especially with the high light at the ceiling where the light's coming in from outside and the dark shadows down by the ground. I don't think I would have gotten an image quite this sharp with no noise if I had not used an HDR blend. So I was very happy to do that, and I was very pleased with the results, and it made it a lot easier to do the editing because I could just forget about the other 3 bracketed shots and just look at the JPEG file and do a quick edit and move on. Save me a lot of time that way. I will probably shoot that way from now on. Which brings us to La Pieta. And I only have one picture of La Pieta. There's no way to get any decent pictures of this statue because after some deranged geologist took a hammer to it, they have a bulletproof piece of plexiglass in front of it, and so you can't even get close to it. So I'm shooting through about 1 inch thick plexiglass that's not real clean. And trying to clean that up in editing, it works a little bit, it doesn't work a little bit. But here are the things that really strike me as we look at this statue. This to me, and Michelangelo's David, those are, you don't get any better than those two sculptures. You just don't. This sculpture was, I think, originally commissioned by a cardinal, French cardinal, who wanted it over his crypt in the basilica. And so that's where it stood originally. And he didn't ask for this particular statue. What he asked for was the finest sculpture ever to be created or ever to be created in the future. That's what he asked for. And to be quite honest, I think Michelangelo gave it to him. Now keep in mind, Michelangelo, when he started this, he was 23 years old, and he finished it at 24. And it is just amazing to me. When I look at this and I see this limp body of our Savior, he looks like he is dead. The way the hands lay, the way the muscles lay. And he probably had a lot to draw on from Da Vinci, because Da Vinci studied these things quite extensively. But even down to, there are these fingers in the folds of the cloth that covers him, and one of them is behind a fold, and the others are in front of the fold. Just little details like that. Or the way his foot hangs at the end. Just the shape of the foot and the way the toes are kind of curled down. It all has this sagging feeling of death. And then you look at Mary, and Mary is his mother. Jesus was 33. Mary was probably 14, 15, 16 when she had Jesus, so you do the math. I don't have time to do that in my head. But she would have been an older looking woman. And now in Greek sculptures, what I learned while I was there, in Greek sculptures, they like to sculpt the idea of the person. And so their skin was always really smooth, and they all looked young and whatever. The Romans, on the other hand, believed in sculpting to make more of a picture, a snapshot of what the person really looks like. So when you look at Roman sculptures, you will see wrinkles in the face, and you will see the aging process taking place. And this was one of the questions that came up early on with La Pieta, was Mary looks like she's younger than Jesus. And that was unusual for Romans. Now there are a couple of reasons for this, I think. One that we covered while I was there with my tour guide is that Catholicism holds that Mary was born without sin. And it is sin that ages us. It is sin that causes our skin to droop and to drag. And Mary didn't have any of that. And so she was going to forever look like a vibrant young lady. Another idea that I ran across later was something that Michelangelo said, and that is that Mary was both the daughter of God and the mother of God. And as the daughter of God, she would have had this really young appearance, and maybe that's the juxtaposition he was trying to achieve. I don't know. But she's beautiful. One other little thing about La Pieta is that when it was first introduced, people who were coming through the basilica were sort of arguing as to who did it. Sculptors were not signing their work, just like painters were not signing their work. Typically they didn't anyway, especially with something that's going to be placed inside a church, because they needed to be humble. But Michelangelo got a little irritated and decided to carve his name along the bodice of her garment at the top. And so if you look closely, you can see the letters that are in there, and it basically says Michelangelo and whatever his last name is, from Florence I did this. And it is said that in later life he deeply regretted that. He never signed another sculpture ever. He deeply regretted it because it was just such an act of pettiness on his part. But he has left us one of the great treasures of the modern world in La Pieta. I hope that this little tour through some parts of Rome has been helpful. We got one more video coming up next week, and that's basically just some street photography that I did. Nothing. There won't be a lot of discussion about historical significance of the streets. But anyway, I hope that you have a great week. If you've not done so yet, please subscribe to my channel. Click the little like button down there. Hit the notification bar. Do a couple of jumping jacks. Yell up and down 3 times. It'll all help. I'll see you next week.